Survivor specialist Phil and Alexa are back with our episode 6 predictions and power rankings for Survivor 44. And today we are joined, I believe this is the third time. Is it the third time? Second or third? By Albert from South Pacific. I believe it's the third time, but he's here to break down Murgatory. What am I supposed to call it? Is it Murgatory? He's back to break it all down. 12 people remaining. Albert, what are you thinking about season 44 so far?
Season 44 is a pleasure to be back on with you guys. I'm having fun with this season so far. I really, what I like about the season thus far is there's some people that I definitely strongly root for and I'm rooting for and pulling for, and some people that I'm like, oof, I don't like this person. And I think it's nice when there is a little bit of polarization and the cast doesn't necessarily blend in the middle. So there's like a few people I really like. And then there's some that I'm like, oh, they're kind of cringy. I'm not really crazy about this person. So I'm excited to what's happening so far. I like where we're at.
That's a really good point. I think I know I recently rewatched Co-Wrong because it was added to Netflix. And I was like, man, there are some good, dislikable people here. And you don't really see that in modern Survivor anymore for a variety of reasons. But it is still nice to have some people that you're not necessarily rooting for, because I feel like, yes, you should or could be rooting for everybody, but there's a lot of players out there who are either playing a game that I don't really like or just aren't really gelling with the way I like to watch. So
100%.
I think we have to do this power rankings now rather than who do you think is the safest, who do you think is going to go home, where you start off with your number one of like people you'd buy a beer, and then at number 12 you just put like, I'd never buy you a beer, like really.
My number one remains the same.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's good to know. But yeah, I so many people, man, you're always nervous. What can you say? What can't you say? But I got to start you off with a hard question, because you just said you're enjoying watching some people, you're not enjoying watching some others. But there has been a big controversy after last week's episode over what we are supposed to call what happened with Matthew. Did he quit, Albert, or was he evacuated? Was he medically evacuated? What are you considering this as a former player?
Yeah, so as a former player, I kind of started to see the writing on the wall last episode. So for those who haven't played, here's an interesting nugget about Survivor. So before you go on and compete in a challenge, actually before you go to tribal council, every player is checked through medical. And they do it intentionally to balance it out, so no one has information of like this person's being checked more often. So everyone gets checked prior, right? So the fact that Probst after the challenge said, Matthew, can you stick around to be checked by medical, was kind of production tipping their hand as to his shoulder situation was a little bit more serious than maybe the story had given us insight to at that point. So at that point I was like, okay, this guy's not doing well. Probst literally in front of the rest of the players told him to stay and get checked by medical after he didn't compete in the challenge. To me, that was a red flag. To me, I'm like, something's going on here. This dude is not doing well. And honestly, I know that there's a lot of pundits on Twitter and back and forth saying that he might have quit or he might have. To me, this is not close to a quit. To me, this is a clear medical evacuation. I think it's kind of silly, the position Matthew put himself in. We could probably talk about that here in a moment, by climbing those rocks for literally no reason. But that being said, I think this is a medevac that the dude was just trying to grind out. He obviously really loves Survivor. You could tell he's passionate about playing. That to me was not a quit at all.
So my biggest question mark surrounding this entire thing, because Alexa and I were trying to figure this out. Alexa listened to Jeff's podcast. I always say I'm going to, and then I don't. And then
it's like 45 minutes. It's an easy commute to work.
I don't commute to work. I sit right in the chair
that's
all
a really
day.
Good point.
But so between that and then Matthew's post-game press, where he was talking about that they didn't really give him a choice, why do you think that they decided not to show us him saying either I'm leaving the game, or the doctor saying I'm not letting you go back in? Because every single other time we've seen a player throughout the entire history of Survivor either get pulled or quit, we have seen it happen. Or at least right after, even if they cut away and they're trying to fool us, they'll go back to it and be like, you need to be pulled from the game, or I'm pulling myself from the game. Why do you think we didn't see that?
It's really interesting because I think if you look at all the cast, Phil, I think that Matthew seemed like a really emotional guy. Somebody who's very like in tune with his emotions, was very always like talking about feel, just a very kind of like very descriptive type of guy. I don't know why they wouldn't have shown that with him, because I feel like him being removed from Survivor, he would have given us something emotional. Maybe it was a situation where they put it in his hands and he kind of waffled. And at first he was like, all right, I'm going to stick it out. And then he's like, maybe I shouldn't. And then he like it was maybe the way it happened was anticlimactic to the point where it wasn't good television and it didn't align with great storytelling and they couldn't edit it properly. But I was very surprised as the way it was presented. I mean, obviously when you see Jeff Probst showing up on the boat to the island, you know what's happening. He doesn't really show up to give players like that. You kind of saw the writing on the wall at that point, but I was surprised the way that they showed that or didn't show it to the, to the viewers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Cause I think like what Phil's saying, like, since he and I obviously haven't played, we're only going off of like what Jeff's saying, what Matthew's saying, but it probably was a little bit of that middle ground. And it probably wasn't an exciting conversation. It was probably like, if you don't choose to leave, we'll take you. So that's not really what like the viewers are going to want to see.
I just get so confused, like, especially with Matthew saying they were pretty much telling me either you pull yourself or we're going to pull you. Like, then just let them, like, just make them pull you, right? Like, I feel I'm confused.
So here's something interesting that I was discussing with a friend of mine early in the season. There's been two scenarios that I thought this season opened up a can of worms, and I'm always really excited by that because that like when current or former gameplay opens up windows for future decision making. I find that super interesting. So the first one I saw was early in the season when we had a medevac episode 1, right? And then I think it was the subsequent challenge, if I'm not mistaken, where two people like stopped and they like had to stop the challenge to give water to
Brandon.
Brandon, and it was somebody else, which is like kind of opens up now. If you think about it, it opens up some creative avenues for players to potentially take advantage of that, right? Where they can be like, oh, I'm on the brink of being medevaced, so let me pretend like I'm doing this so I can get an IV. Like I remember like when I personally played, the only time I received something from medical was after our challenge on day 38, where we're literally 4 players and we ran through the gauntlet of the final immunity challenge. And like all of us were like dead. Like we literally were like, I was a sack of bones. And I was like, Coach was dead. Ozzy was dead. Everyone's dead. And then they're just like, all right, here's like your first sip of cold water in 30 minutes. That's literally
that day doesn't even exist anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So, but my point is like, if we read through the lines, think about this, maybe again, in production, they're really sharp. They've seen this stuff happen a lot and they don't want their game being exploited. So if I'm Jeff and I'm production, so maybe because they already had a precedent of some, a medevac and then somebody towing the line of like stopping a challenge. Now with Matthew, I wouldn't be surprised if Probst was maybe a little heavy-handed with how he delivered like you're in or you're out, because he was just kind of like over this, like people, kind of towing the line on medical stuff. It was just like, and maybe the way he was delivering it as a host wasn't, good enough with like a heartfelt story to it, where it's like, yeah, we don't want to show that. It makes us look bad. I don't know. I'm just again, this is just me speculating, obviously.
I love that you brought up the IV, spoken like a true athlete from South Florida, because I was talking about this a lot when this happened. And I honestly thought that was one of the most unfair things that has ever happened in the history of Survivor. And like the comments didn't agree with me. But I really believe, because I had a whole bunch of medical stuff last year, and the way they were helping me was with IVs. I mean, IVs were essentially what were keeping me hydrated. And so for Brandon to be like, I can't even stand up, and then he stands up and walks over, but they give him an IV anyway, I was like, ooh, that is tricky, because, man, I'll tell you what, like, you were an athlete. You get other people who are athletes who go out there and kind of know the effect that an IV can have, or even somebody who works in a hospital, anything, that effect that an IV can have. And you're really feeling it, and you're dehydrated, and you're hungry, and all of a sudden you get out there for a challenge, and it's like, Jeff, I can't do this. I need some. And now they've shown they're willing to give IVs. Like, I agree. That's an interesting door that they opened with that.
It's a slippery slope, man. It really is. Yeah. And like truth be told, probably 100% of competitors in a challenge on Survivor need an IV. Like, seriously. Like, I was never out there like, dude, I'm this is great. I'm chilling. Every moment was pure torture. Like, don't get it twisted. So when you open up yourself to that, I don't know. I just feel like Jeff was a little bit like he's guarding his baby of the integrity of Survivor. especially in today's game, right? Where now, what do they sell it as? This is the hardest Survivor we play. Everything's tough. Everything's cutthroat. So if they put on the kid gloves with this new process, it could really open up to something else. So I don't know if the Matthew thing was like them being stern on him and they didn't like the way it was presented on film, because there's no retakes. Like Probst, as much as there's a little bit of editing magic on the show, he's never going to be like, let's do that over. Like it's not scripted television or a film, right? So maybe the way it happened was it didn't show production in a really good light, and they just were like, we're not going to show it. I think that's, and again, it could be back to that precedent we talked about with Brandon and the IV.
Yeah, we'll definitely see how it goes forward. And we'll see if anything like this ever happens again. Personally, I think that they probably love Matthew, good storyteller, really playing the game hard, deep passion for the game of Survivor. With what happened with Bruce and the fact that Jeff already said he's going to ask Bruce back, like Bruce has an open invite, I do think that we're kind of getting near the point where they could be thinking all-star season. And they're thinking all-star season. Matthew is definitely an easy person to cast for that kind of thing because of the way he plays. So maybe they're also saying he didn't quit. No. He didn't pull, like, no. I mean, we did end up hearing
like
he broke like 3 different bones in his shoulder. He tore muscles. I mean, it wasn't just a rotator cuff. It wasn't just a dislocated shoulder. It was broken bones. I think he had surgery. Like, it was an actual massive issue.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that much behind it. That's that makes sense. Yeah, falling from a rock like that looks like it could lead to some serious injuries.
Don't climb rocks. All right. Well, we're going to Murgatory, which I'm just going to go with Murgatory. I don't know.
That sounds better.
Okay. Because Purgatory, Murgatory, but then it's merged. It's like Murgatory. Anyway. So Mike Bloom tweeted out what the split is going to be. So Albert, did you see this tweet or no?
No, I do love Mike Bloom though, True Dark Times. But
okay, so I'll say this before we go into our 1 through 12 of who's safest, who's going to go home, all of that. So one side is going to be Carson, Carolyn, Jamie, Brandon, Franny, and Matt. So Matt and Franny stay together. Carson and Carolyn both get back together. Carson's idol is no longer good. Carolyn's idol is legit still. Brandon has a fake idol, and then we have Jamie, who thinks she has a real idol but doesn't have a real idol because she has the fake one from Matthew. And on the other side, we have Danny with an idol, Heidi, Josh, Kane, Lauren, and Jam Jam. So Lauren has the extra vote. Heidi doesn't have anything. Josh, his idol is fake, and everybody in the world knows it. Kane doesn't have anything. Jam Jam doesn't have anything, but Danny has the real idol. So those are the two sides that we're looking at here as we come into this. The one thing that you always got to keep in mind is all 12 of them are going to vote. Like, even though one team is going to lose and those 6 people are going to be in danger, all 12 are going to vote. So it's not like, oh, Danny, Heidi, and Josh can just team up and vote off Jam Jam. Like, that's not going to happen. Where do we see this kind of going based on how this broke out?
Yeah, I think that's a fortunate draw for a guy like Josh, that he gets to blend with some other people and gets to get split up, if I'm not mistaken, from Carolyn, who seemed like his biggest adversary at the last, going into what was going to be the last vote. There's a couple people in some really interesting spots. I think Josh is a guy who, if you look at classic Survivor like strategy and positioning, he's in a really bad spot because he has a false sense of security with allies that aren't really with him, which is a huge, dangerous thing to be in. Yam Yam's really interesting. He's a player that I think he's really dangerous. I think he has the ability to do probably the secret sauce of Survivor. This is, to me, like the most important thing in Survivor is Yam Yam's influential, but he doesn't seem threatening. So when you can have influence on others, but people aren't scared of you, that's a recipe for going very far in the game. So I think that it's interesting. And Yam Yam's, again, he's not a guy that's like, I'm married to one way or the other. He's almost like, I'm sure people make comparisons for a little bit of a Sandra element to him. So I can see him kind of now reconnecting with Josh and going with the flow on that side. Brandon seems pretty malleable. I don't necessarily think that is Carson in that group too, or is Carson in the Carson
was with, so it was Carson,
Brandon.
Carolyn, Jamie, Matt, Franny, Brandon. So Carson's with Brandon. Yeah.
Wow, that's an interesting group.
Yeah. It's kind of even from a challenge perspective, I think.
It is even from a challenge perspective. Franny and Matt are an interesting duo. I think Franny's one of my. She's if we were doing a pure power rank, she's near the top of my leaderboard. Yeah. She reminds me a lot of Sophie in a lot of ways. Very smart. I think a very aware player. Carson is my favorite player on the season. I would have to say I love the kid. The fact that he's like making these like spreadsheets and like algorithms and like 3D printing the challenges. I absolutely love the kid. I was very puzzled by his move though. I was very puzzled when he sided with Carolyn and ended up voting off Helen, and then Sarah. Yeah. That was like kind of a weird. I was surprised because I thought Sarah made more sense to be a natural ally for him. But to me, those are the power figures. I look at the power figures and I look at who's in the bottom. The power figures are the Carsons, the Yam Yams, Franny. I think is in a really good position. And then I think some of the bottom players are like Josh is in a lot of trouble. I think Carolyn is she's either going to be like dragged to the end or be out really early. There's some interesting characters there. I really like Danny too. I like Danny. I think Danny's a very fun.
He's
kind
so
of
fun.
Yeah.
What's really interesting about the Carolyn, Jam Yam, and Josh situation is they were inches from voting each other out. And Carolyn, I think, even directly tells Josh, I was going to vote for you. And he says, I know. Like they were as close to being like crossing the line as they could be. So now do you work together? I don't feel like any of the three of them really were happy with each other. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that sort of evolves.
Well, I think Alexa, I think Josh and Carolyn were directly vote as adversaries and Yam Yam was kind of the swing vote in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then I think if I can read through the edit properly, it seemed like Yam Yam was slightly siding with Josh. And then when the whole Josh fake idol thing happened, which was like one of the hardest things for me to watch, like I literally felt physical pain for him.
It's so bad.
Yam Yam's like, wait, what is this? And he's like it's literally watching a car crash happen in slow motion. When that happened, I'm like, oof, this kid's done. Like I thought like literally Josh is, that was going to be the nail in his coffin. And he now is kind of in a really, like I said, I think he got a really advantageous draw that him and Carolyn are going to be split at least for one vote, right? And then he can maybe try to make some inroads with that group, with Yam Yam with that group.
But they're still going to be voting. So that's the thing with this Murgatory. So Carolyn can still vote for Josh and Josh can still vote for Carolyn. Yeah. So I think that's what makes it tough. Like when I look at this, and we are going to make you rank them 1 through 12, Albert, because yeah. So that will happen. So don't give us spoilers on who's going.
Not too much. Yeah.
But when I look at this, I do like Josh's group with Danny, Heidi, Jam Jam. Like I really think that works for him. I think that's a good group. But what scares me is if this challenge is as physical as it was in 41 and 42, and honestly, I can't remember the one from 43. The other side has Brandon. Brandon's the strongest guy out there because he had an IV on day 2. So he's feeling it still. He's still feeling the effects 9 days later. But they have Brandon, and they have probably the best puzzle person in Carson. So they have the 2 big strengths you need. So if they win, that's where I worry for Josh because Carolyn still can vote for him. If Carolyn wasn't there, I think that this would have been a perfect 5-5 split. They've already merged. One tribe's going to go to tribal. The next tribe's going to go to tribal. I think this would have been a perfect split for Josh. But I do worry with where he is right now. That being said, I'll start off with my number 1. And Albert, I'm glad that we're watching the same show because for anybody who's a patron, patreon.com/Survivor Specialists, I gave my top 4 contenders for this season. And you named 3 of them already with Jam Jam, Carson, and Franny as power players. And then you said, and I like Danny. And that was who my number 4 was. So
those are my top 4. Yeah.
Those are the top 4. Like that's who I'm feeling. And I'm actually thinking Franny is the safest this week. So I'm going to put Franny at number 1 and say she's the safest because I think she's on the stronger side, the side that's a little bit more likely to win this challenge. And if they lose, she's got Brandon as a shield. She's got Carson as a potential shield. She's got even Jamie, who's probably going to be running around saying, I have an idol. You can't vote me out, possibly as a shield. So I think Franny is actually in a really good spot. And this is always a tough week. So I'm going to put her at number 1 in my rankings and then turn it over to everybody else.
Yeah, I don't want to give away my 1 through 4, but they may have just been mentioned in the past 90 seconds, like a handful of times. The number 1 person I'd like to purchase a beer for, and I think is the safest, is Carolyn. I think the merge is going to be very different. We've seen her actually kind of thriving in this, like in the pre-merge. She has an idol. She has a lot of guts in how long she's been holding on to it. We're kind of at the point of, will you hold on for too long? But I think we have been shown time and time again that Carolyn is significantly more perceptive than we assume she is, and then the other players assume she is. And I mean, Danny and Brandon don't want to get rid of her. And I think Danny is somebody who is going to be commanding a lot of votes. So I think Carolyn's still in a good spot. I don't really think she has any direct allies anymore. Like her and Jam Jam are very on the fence. I think Carson would happily play with her because he seemed to really enjoy that when they did vote together previously. But I think Carolyn's fine.
Wow, I'm a little surprised with that pick, Alexa.
Got to keep it exciting.
To quote my former season mate Jim Rice, he said he was quoting our season saying something along the lines of, "In the game of Survivor, there's constants and there's variables, right? And you really want to play more with the constants because the variables are very tricky."
Mm-hmm.
I think Carolyn is like the definition of a variable.
A strong variable.
She can literally just start speaking in tongues in front of people, and next thing you know, they're going to be like, "Wait, she's kind of crazy. Like maybe I shouldn't trust the fate of my game in this human being." So I don't know if I would rank her that highly as a safe in safety. If it's time to give my number 1, is it time?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go for it, please.
I'm going with Carson because the kid is poised. He's intelligent. He understands the game, and the X factor for him is there's been a lot of players who have that, but he has that, and people also seem to trust him a lot. It's even when he was part of that swap, which I thought was a really interesting swap for him, right? Where they just draw you to a different tribe. I was like, oh shit, this kid's in a really good position. Now he just got thrown into a new tribe. This is going to be tough for him. I was rooting for him. And it's like he picked up right where he left off in his previous tribe. Everyone seemed to really like him. Everyone seemed to connect with him. They seem to flow information through him. He's always seems to be the person people are telling information to. So to me, that's like the definition of somebody who's in a good position in the game. So I have him as my number 1.
I have him as my number 2. I will say, like, so for me, it's always tough because, I mean, you played season 23. People forget that at the end of May of 2024, season 23 will be the midway point of Survivor, which is really mind-blowing, right? Like, that's crazy. Like that's how long ago you almost played in the first half of Survivor, which doesn't make sense.
That's crazy.
But it's so different nowadays because when you played, you said Jim Rice talking about variables and constants. And I've been saying for a long time, there's too many variables now in the game of Survivor. Like they do too many random things. There's too many idols. There's too many fake votes and fake idols and fake whatever, like too many lost votes, 6-person tribes, people like there's too much. There's too many variables. But that also makes it hard for me to properly say, wow, Carson's really good at this game, or Danny's really good at this game, or Jam Jam's really good at this game, or Lauren's really good at this game. But the one thing I definitely agree with him, why I think Carson is so safe, and I have him at number 2, despite the fact that his idol is no longer good, because now they all live together on one beach, but they said, that's it. You don't have that idol anymore. He went over to that tribe. Matthew told him a secret. And now he's the only one who knows that Jamie has an idol, even though, it's not real, but he thinks that Jamie has an idol and he can go and tell that to his people. Kane loves him. We don't really know what Lauren thinks, but we don't really know what Lauren thinks in general on this season. And Brandon is definitely being set up as the big macho man who just gets taken down because he underestimated people. Like, it is so obvious.
Oh, yeah.
So for me, Carson, he's in good with so many people. The only people he hasn't talked to is anybody from Soka. And I feel like he's going to do great with people from Soka. I really do. I think he's just going to be able to kill it. His social game is really solid. Whatever it is, whether it's the cast he's with, whether it's just how he is naturally, his social game is killing it right now. And that's why I have my number 2.
Yeah, I mean, I'll you guys have already said a couple. I have Franny at number 2 and I have Carson at number 3, all kind of for the same reasons. With Franny, I will say this every podcast. I'm just so happy that she and Matt can play, and they're kind of letting them play and not really concerning themselves with whatever romance showmance thing they have going on. And I think this actually could bounce back and really work for her. I think she knows that Matt still doesn't have a vote. So that's going to be really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The only downside is she thinks Matt's idol is real. And the only person who doesn't know that is Danny, who has the actual real idol.
Right.
But I think Franny is someone very similar to Carson, where everybody seems comfortable going to her with information. Jamie was going up to her talking crap about her boyfriend, not even knowing that was her boyfriend. So I think that shows what kind of player Franny is, that people feel really comfortable talking to her. I think she's aligned with pretty much everybody on her tribe. So she's in a good spot. And same with Carson. Carson just has even more connections.
So who do you have at 2, Albert?
My number 2 is Yam Yam. I think that Yam Yam, what's happened to his Survivor game, a lot of people would have crumbled, right? His tribe, he had a medical evacuation early from one of their strongest players who they're hoping to help him win challenges. They've had, tribal after tribal, loss after loss. And I feel like through the crap of the storm, he's always remained calm and malleable. And here's what really I think separates him. A lot of people, when they play Survivor, try to play a social game, meaning they're like, I need to be likable and get along with others. He's not playing a social game. He's a socially likable person. People generally seem to gravitate towards him. They seem to trust him. They seem to just like laugh and be warm and like enjoy his like, because he's a little flamboyant. He's a little bit of a character. He's a little bit out there, but people seem to just love it. And also in all like facets, even when he like at the very beginning of the game, when he spoke in front of everyone just like laughed. And I just think that he's a guy that's going to be cool and people are going to be comfortable with. They're not going to, he doesn't appear as a physical threat. So I think Yam Yam's going to be somebody who's going to be in a really good position to be like, how can I help you? What can I do? How can we do this? He just has that warm energy that people are going to gravitate towards.
Yeah. And even though he's on the side that I find to be weaker, I have him at 3. So Albert, we're pretty much just one off from each other right now. I have him at 3.
He's my 4.
Yeah, and so he's Alexis 4. So we all have very similar towards the top. But I think what works in Jam Jam's favor is when I look at this tribe he's on, or this team he's on, and knowing everybody's going to vote, Danny, Heidi, Josh, Kane, Lauren, Jam Jam. Carolyn made it very clear that she was pissed off at the Meat Brigade, as Josh called it, which is just a great name for an alliance, and I can't help it. But the Meat Brigade, it's awful. It's so bad.
I can't say it.
So Carolyn had that. Carolyn and Jam Jam, I think, are still playing together. She wants to play with Jam Jam, which I think will work in Jam Jam's favor. Then he has Carson, who he has a good relationship with. And I just think that when you look at the other people with him, Josh, Danny, Heidi, that's who people are going to target. Soka's got most of their people. And we see this time and time again once we get to the merge and this type of thing happens. The team that's been decimated generally is okay. We see it all the time because people are like, look, there's only 3 of you. We'll figure it out. Like, we'll get through this. Soka has 5. And, it's 5 for them. It's 4 for orange, and it's 3 for purple. They're going to want to target a Soka. And if that team loses, Jam Jam, even if they decide, okay, we're not going to target Ahsoka, we're going to target Kane or Lauren, Jam Jam never comes up in that situation. And I agree with you, Albert. His social game is just, he just has a good social game. Like, why get rid of Jam Jam? You don't think he's somebody who can win yet. But I feel like he's a Marianne where you don't think he can win now. You better just realize he can win before Final 7. Otherwise, you're going to find that you have no chance of getting rid of him and you're going to lose to him.
What's also really impressive about him is he can be adversaries with somebody and then pretty much immediately be able to like swallow his pride and work with them again. He and Josh hated each other minute 2. And by the time it was minute 42, they were potentially going to vote together. He and Carolyn are clearly fighting pretty often. They're clearly going back and forth, but they've made it this far together. So I think that says a lot too, that he's willing to make amends to move forward.
Yeah. So who do you have at 3, Albert?
My three is it was kind of I mean we're our top four is kind of the same I think for all of us. My three is Franny for a couple reasons. I think she drew well. Like to your point, Phil, I didn't really process it in that term, but yeah, her side is probably more likely to win immunity. I think she's just going to blend with the people on that side better. Obviously, her and Matt are like thick as thieves. I think she and Carson would work really well together. I think that she's not someone whose threat level is going to be perceived as highly as it should be. And I think she's another player who I think nobody's really gunning for her. There's nobody really like, oh, I got to come after her. I think their biggest stumbling block is going to be in about 3 or 4 votes when the numbers start to dwindle and all of a sudden her and Matt become more of a more of a face up partnership. But I think for this specific vote, I think she's in a good position.
Now, you played in the era back before Final Four fire making was a guarantee, and you also played in the era where we didn't know that Final Twos weren't going to come back by the time you were playing. So there was always the possibility of Final Two. Do you think that as showmans in this era, where at Final Four you're doing fire making, so it's not even like you're voting somebody out? Do you think a showmans is actually like so not powerful at this point, or do you still think it carries the same weight that it used to? Because when I look at it, I say at Final Four, if one of them takes the other, well, they might split the votes at Final Tribal. Like they might not get them all. And you know that there's going to be a third seat there. It can't be Boston Rob and Amber anymore. So what do you think about that?
That's a really interesting point. I mean, when you first started the question, I was like, no, I disagree with you. But I think looking at it from a win perspective, like winning the game standpoint, I think I agree with you. But I think that people try to play Survivor Advance in the game of Survivor, no pun intended. And I think that the difference with today's game and yesteryear's game is it used to be alliances and the people you work with was way more rigid. Today's game, it's way more fluid, right? Everyone's like Alexa just mentioned, Josh and Yam Yam weren't working together. Next thing you know, they're synced up for vote, and then they might be against each other again. When you have a showmance or a couple that's so strong, I think that that's really dangerous because you know that they're not going to turn on each other. So it's like that's like the only true alliance. It used to be like, this is my alliance, and if you're not with us, you're a flipper, you're a flip flopper, and that's bad. Well, like that doesn't really exist anymore. You don't really, people don't get like, oh, I can't believe you flipped on our alliance. That's like frowned upon. If anything, that's like good gameplay now. Where it's like, oh, you moved with them and you came back, right? So I think that in the early mid stages of the game, the showmance couples are super. They should be taken more seriously, more dangerously. But if they do advance to the end of the game, that's a really sophisticated argument to be like, hey, they're going to take votes away from each other. Like I think that that's a really cool pitch you could play late game.
Because if you know that that's an alliance, you know Matt and Franny, you almost think your goal should be to be the third there. Because if you're or even their fourth, right? Because if you're in an alliance of 4 now with Matt and Franny can't get down to Final Four and take out you at 4 and the other person at 3, like Boston Rob and Amber were to do, which is what made showmances so terrifying in the game of Survivor. But now you get down to Final Four, even if Matt and Franny win, and Matt wins Final Four immunity, takes Franny with him. There's 2 other people. Whoever wins that fire making probably has the upper hand over the showmance now when they sit next to them at Final 3. So if you can put yourself in the fire making position and you're confident enough to win, like a Mike Gabler was last season, where he did it in like 5 minutes. If you think you're going to win that, be in an alliance of 4 with them at this point, because it really doesn't affect you the way it used to.
Yeah, it's just tough because you're putting a lot of eggs in their basket because it's a game of votes, and they're 2 guaranteed votes that are going in the direction they choose. So they just wield so much power and leverage that if they feel that you're going to be more popular or liked, that like they're just always going to trump you. So I don't know. I still think it's really dangerous to have a showmance around.
Well, good segue there, Albert, because you said 2 votes, and my number 4 is somebody who has 2 votes, and that's about all we know about them, and that's Lauren. She has really vanished off of our television screen since the first episode. I love her tweets now where she's talking about her only alliance is with the broom, and she's just in the corner sweeping. Like, I think it's hilarious because, I mean, it's got to be so frustrating. I mean, you had arguably one of the most underedited players of all time on your season in Rick. I mean, nobody knew anything about Rick except that he was from Utah and wore a cowboy hat. And all of a sudden at the end of the game, it was like, hey, he could win. And we're like, could he win?
What?
When did
Like,
we find that out? But you know, Lauren, she got the extra vote in the first episode. She correctly didn't vote so that she could get the extra vote. So she's sitting pretty. She's got 2 votes, but we haven't heard anything from her. The reason I think she's safe this week, even though I think her prospects of winning are pretty much 0, I think she is safe this week because nobody on her tribe has shown any desire to vote her out of the game yet. With all the conversations that have been going on over there, we saw a lot from Matthew. We've seen a lot from Brandon. We've seen a lot from Kane even. And then Jamie has picked up and Carson got swapped over there. Nobody said, you know, if we lose, Lauren's gone. Like, we just got to get rid of her. Really, I don't think anybody's ever said the name Lauren this whole season, which is a good place to be when you hit this merge episode. Because even though I think she's, again, on the weaker side, there are so many other threats to get rid of before you get rid of Lauren. And if they want to try to pull something fancy where, hey, there's only 5 Sokas and we pulled a Soka over, so we have an 8-4 advantage and we're going to split it 4-4, Lauren can play that extra vote and make sure that if she's one of the people getting 4, somebody else is getting 5. Like, she can make sure that's going to happen. So I like her positioning here, even if all I know about her is she likes her broom. That's it. I don't know anything else. We're up to you again, Albert, because Alexa, you said 4 was Jam Jam, right?
Yes, go ahead.
So Albert, you're up again with 4.
Yeah, this is I might be breaking the proper game theory optimal way to set these power rankings, but I'm just gonna go with it. I'm going with Danny. I'm going Danny number 4. Only because even though he's a good player and I like him and he's one of my winner picks or in my winner circle, if you will, I think he's the kind of guy that can do some things that can be incendiary. He's a little aggressive. The showcase at the sanctuary with Brandon was definitely off-putting to Carolyn and now can maybe reverberate the wrong way. But I still think he's good enough that he's going to maneuver this mid-stage part of the game. I like him as a player. I think he's sneaky. I think he's aggressive. I think he's going to take shots and chances. I like the way he plays. And he's still likable enough for that archetype where he's not like the douchey, Jersey guy. He's he still has some appeal to him. So I'm taking Danny as my 4th player here.
You know, up until he just was talking about his muscles and Brandon's muscles at that feast, he was my winner pick. And then that just looked so bad for him that I'm like, man, that's an Adam Klein with Taylor level of stumble here, where it really feels like this could screw him, but Adam Klein ended up winning. So what do I know? But that's what this felt like, which is why I have him a little bit lower this week, because he is freshly, and I don't know what the actual word is, but he is very much in the crosshairs of Carolyn.
Let me add something small, little wrinkle that I noticed here. This is again to talk about what we mentioned earlier. There's a lot of times in Survivor where decision points come up and people do things, and then all of a sudden my brain always goes to oh my god, if I was coaching a player who's going to go on, or if I play again, this is you should definitely do this. So if we notice there, they got sent on a journey and they were sent to a feast. Mm-hmm. My first thought was any future players who get sent on a journey, doesn't matter what the journey is. It could be what happened to Carson, where they received idols. It could be risk your vote, turn the pirate ship thing, right? You should always, the 3 of you people, say, okay, we're going to tell everyone that we went on a feast, and here are the list of items that we ate on this feast. Mm-hmm. We ate chicken, we ate that, and that. So then when they come back, be we're just going to tell our tribes that we went on a feast. And then oh, trust me, I can even tell you what we had. We had this, and that. And then if they go to corroborate your story, they'll just ask somebody else what they ate. They'll be Alexa, what did you eat? And then you're we ate this, and that. And it's a good way to cover that you might have extra power, I think. So
I love that, because I was saying this in our recap. They didn't believe that Carolyn didn't go because they haven't done that in the past. And people always come back and they're like, I lost 5 votes. I did this, I that, and the other thing. I think that's a great idea. And I don't think this really happens anymore, because I think in previous seasons you could do this. You used to be able to bring food back, or bring chicken bones or whatever back. I doubt they can do that anymore. But if they could, and they could bring something and be here's proof, and also here's some food for you. I have Danny at number 5, kind of for the same reason. I think he had a pretty brutal stumble, but he has been playing really well. And he's somebody who has an idol, and I don't think he would be afraid to play it. And also, I don't know where Carolyn stands on the two of them. It was Brandon who told her he could take her to the end. I feel like he was maybe the one who said the kill shot rather than Danny. I think he's okay. He has a strong alliance. He seems very close with Heidi. He seems close with the whole Soka group, and he's going to be tight with Brandon. Carolyn comes from the smaller tribe right now. Mm-hmm. She has less allies just on paper. So he's good for now.
I have Carolyn at my number 5, but first I have to say, Albert, there's probably going to be like in total when you take in our Spotify and everything, probably like close to like 6,000, 7,000 people who listen to this. I really hope one of them is playing season 46 or 45 or 47 or 48. And I hope they listen to this because I think that's a great idea. And you've been talking about it a lot tonight with gaming the game, right? Because that's what Survivor's becoming. Right. And I get frustrated with it with the challenges and things like that. But that's a good way to game the game. If you just say, hey, we're going out there, we're going to say it's a feast, here's what we ate, blah, blah, blah. Until somebody catches on to it, like that's what you have to do. The only way I think you get in trouble with that is if you go on like a day 1 or day 2 journey, because why are they giving you food on day 1 or day 2? You're not that hungry. That's the only way I think it would hurt you. But
for sure.
My number 5, though, like I said, I have Carolyn. And my main reason for Carolyn is this. I think Carolyn is probably going to go deep in this game. Unless all of a sudden she kind of pulls like a Debbie type situation where they're like, we just can't keep her anymore. We need to get rid of her, because we saw that in Co-Wrong. And we saw it again in Game Changers, because she went nuts in front of the rock that Matthew actually fell off and pretty much broke his shoulder on when she was screaming, I'm mad as hell. But
well, she reminds me of Nora too from Islands of the Islands.
Yes.
Where her and Nora have a lot of like similar parallels too. And she was a finalist.
Yeah, but I feel like we spoke to Nora. We had Nora on this podcast, and I feel like Nora was a little bit, even though she was very like, like in your face and like kind of like scatterbrained a little bit, but like I feel like Nora was a little bit calmer. Like I don't really know how to explain it, but I feel like Nora was a little bit calmer. Nora felt a little bit more like I'm just so happy to be here that I can't like keep my emotions in check, because I even I think we were both actually, Albert, I think at their finale party and everything. And like when I walked in, Nora knew who I was, and she like screamed, and I was like, I didn't even know Nora knew who I was. How did this happen? But like, I just feel like that's her personality. Whereas I think Carolyn right now is like, she's something people have not seen on Survivor before. I really believe that. And I feel like almost a lot of these people probably haven't interacted with somebody like Carolyn in their life. And so I think that's actually working a little bit to her advantage right now, because nobody knows how to take her. They're overlooking her. They don't think she's very good at the game. They think she's going to be a goat to take to the end. But she also has a real idol, and she's one of only 2 people with a real idol right now. And if they're going to try to vote her out here, they're going to tell her that they're going to vote her out, because they're all probably going to assume she doesn't have anything. We're not worried about her. Like, they've already let us know how little they think of her.
Right.
And I think compared to Nora as well, I think Nora, who was very excited and all that, was a little bit more gullible than Carolyn is. I think Carolyn is very much aware of what's going on, almost to an extreme level of paranoia. And she is absolutely somebody who will say, here's my idol, Jeff. I'm not going home tonight, even if she ends up getting 0 votes.
Right.
Hmm.
It's a good argument, actually. You're making me reconsider my list. You're making me reconsider my list a little bit here, but I'll give you my counter soon.
Well, who do you have at 5?
Okay, so I have Matt, not Matthew, obviously Matt Blankenship, Matt, who's part of Franny and Matt Frat.
Frat.
Reason being, I think in that side, there's still, listen, I think Franny's such a well-positioned player that she's still going to be closely drawn, like protect him. She's going to relay information to him if he's in trouble. I think that there's some natural synergies there between, we saw last episode, Kane tried to reach out to Carson and be like, hey, we're like nerds, which I actually thought was hilarious, because to me it was, there's a great Mike Birbiglia skit, one of my favorite comics, who like talks about, he's like, I had a girlfriend in high school who said, you're like a nerd, but you're not even smart. And I feel like that was what was Kane talking to Carson. Carson's
Yeah.
like, he's like, we're both smart, right? We're both nerds. And in my head, I'm like, Carson's so much smarter than him. But I don't. But Carson's just like, yeah, man, we're the same.
Yeah. Kane's were all movies and TV. Kane was like me as a nerd, right? It's all
Different
movies,
kind of
TV
nerds.
shows, games.
He's like, I like Lord of the Rings. And he's like, I'm building a simulator for NASA. You can make it happen. Yeah. But anyway, so I think that I think Matt's well positioned and he's going to do well with like, I think Carson, I see Carson and Fanning working really well together. And by proxy, I think that'll include Matt into that kind of fold a little bit. So I think he should be okay for this stage of the game until we get a little bit further.
Now, this is something I'm not sure of. So I actually am asking this to both of you in case either of you know, or maybe the chat will have an idea. I don't know. Matt doesn't have a vote, but can he play his shot in the dark?
I was just thinking that. I think he cannot. I don't know if they've ever said that, but you're not risking anything. And the whole
you're using your one-time shot in the dark though. It's a one-time play.
It is true, but you're not giving up your vote,
giving up your
right?
vote.
Which is supposed to be. I get it, but you're only giving up you're only losing half of what the shot in the dark is really supposed to be hurting.
Yeah,
I don't know.
This impacts where I put him.
Well, because
I thought that I'm sorry, I thought the loser vote was only pre-merge. He still loses. Oh,
because he has only gone to one tribal.
Two.
Oh, okay.
And he lost 2 votes. So he lost 2 votes. So he loses it for the first 2 tribal councils he goes to. And he never went to a second tribal council in the pre-merge. So he's going to go to this one. I'm going to put Matt at 6. And then I'm going to go Danny at 7. So I'll do mine. I'll do both of those right now since you both already did Danny. And since, Albert, you're talking about Matt. So Matt as my number 6, the reason is I totally agree with you. Like whatever happens with Franny, he's going to know. I think Danny wants to work with Franny. I also think Matt, much like you were saying with Jam Jam, he's just a social guy. He's just a nice guy. And I think the way people are going to underestimate Carolyn is how they're going to underestimate Matt. Because Matt, to me, and I said this on my last podcast, he reminds me of Eric Reichenbach. Super happy to be there. He's young beyond his years. What's the opposite of being wise beyond your years? He is that, okay?
He's wrapped around a girl's finger right now. He's going to do
like a
wrapped around a girl's finger. He is just waiting to give up his immunity necklace so that somebody else can win the game. And I just feel like, but he's loving it. And Eric Reichenbach is one of my all-time favorite players. I think he's one of the most underrated in the history of the game. And I think he's a great character. Like, I love Eric Reichenbach. And I think Matt is so that. And he loves being there, and he knows he's naive. And he knows that he's not in the part of his life that he needs to be in to properly play Survivor. And he's loving it anyway. And he's just out there and he's playing. But I think part of the reason why Eric Reichenbach was able to survive so long in Micronesia and then again in whatever it was, Fans vs. Favorites 2, was because everybody else always seemed like they were more of an issue than Eric. Eric just seemed like, oh, he's so nice. He's such a great guy. If Eric gets to the end, and I know I've said this my whole life, and I know people would disagree. If he sits next to Sari, if he sits next to Amanda, if he sits next to Parvati, he wins that game. He wins that game. I really believe that because I just think he played such a strong underdog game and all the fans were going to vote for him. And James, because James hated everybody by the end of that game. But I do think...
And he had an immunity run, right? Didn't he have a...
He did. He went on an immunity run. He won like 3 in a row and then gave up that last one when he would have been at Final Four with freaking Natalie and Sari and Amanda, whatever. So I just think Matt is similar in that way where it's like, what's he going to do to us? Like, it's fine. We can let him hang around. And then the reason why I put him at 6 ahead of Danny is because he doesn't have a vote. But I also think that just looking at this breakdown, he's probably going to be on the winning side. He's going to be very lucky that he is going to his second tribal council without actually being able to go home. And that is really great for him because to not have a vote at a tribal council where you can't go home anyway, whatever. You got through it. Good for you, buddy. And I put Danny at 7. Danny has a real idol. I just worry that maybe Danny thinks he's in a better spot than he is. Carolyn, he underestimates her, doesn't think she has any say. Carolyn's going to all these people. We got to get rid of Danny and Brandon and all that. Maybe the vote does land on Danny. Danny doesn't play his idol. Why would he? He thinks he's sitting pretty. And Danny goes home. But I still put him at 7 because I think that's a very low likelihood of happening. Anyway, I got a bunch of Facebook reactions when I said that Eric Reichenbach was going to win. Look,
you know that emoji with one eyebrow is like a diagonal and the other is straight.
Oh yeah.
That's what I looked at myself and I was like,
there's my hot take of all time, but I'm telling you, he would have won. And maybe that's just what 16-year-old Phil thought, but I'm telling you, he would have won the damn game.
What 16-year-old Phil deserved.
It is, dude.
38-year-old Albert does agree that Matt looks like he could be an ice cream scooper. Also,
yes. Okay, there you go. At least you agree with that part, right? At least,
sure.
Which is funny because I think Matt's older than Eric by like 3 or 4 years, and I feel like, man, they were both 17 when they went out to play the game. I'm not buying that either one of them could go buy a beer right now. Either one of you, who wants to do their number 5 first?
Go ahead, Albert. I already did my 5.
Or, I'm sorry, number 6. Number 6. I can't count.
So this is to me where the cast starts to break off into like 2 separate like pockets. I feel like our first grouping, for me at least, was a lot of my contenders that I think are not just necessarily going to go deep in the game, because there's some people I think can still go deep, but are like my core like winner potentials. After here now, I think it's like the percentage of winning likelihood goes down a lot for me. I'm going to say I'm a little bit surprised, but I'm going to go with Lauren as this is 7th, no? Or
6. So you did
6.
Carson, Jam, Franny, Danny, Matt, and now Lauren.
Sorry. Yeah. So Lauren, okay, because then Kane's following. Okay. Yeah. So Lauren, because of what you said, she actually has a legitimate advantage, which, by the way, how many fake advantages are currently, isn't it 3 or 4? People have 2 fake idols.
4 people. Carolyn, Danny.
No, fake.
Oh, fake. Carolyn,
Josh,
Matt, Brandon, Josh, Jamie, and Carson. Oh my God.
No, because Carson doesn't have a fake one.
No, Carson's
it's kind of fake now.
Oh, well, that's the thing, right? So I guess you could say that he has a fake one if he tries to use the one that he got that's no longer valuable. But I think they all announced that they run out. I don't think
it was announced.
No?
I don't know.
Maybe
they didn't
last
show
week,
it.
I thought.
Yeah,
but anyway.
My head's spinning on this one, but I feel like in a game that's like so saturated with all these fake advantages, I've never seen people really believing that so many fakes are fake. Lauren actually having something of merit, being a player who I don't think is very high on people's threat radar. I think that she is positioned to this is where her game needs to start, because we haven't seen her play much, we haven't seen her do much. So I'm curious to see where she fits in, but she would just be kind of an odd vote off at this juncture, because there really would be much to why she would get voted off at this point.
Agreed.
I have Lauren at 6 for pretty much the exact same reason. She also, I guess it doesn't really matter, but Matt doesn't have a vote. She pretty much is canceling that aspect out, assuming she chooses to use hers. This is probably a good time for her to use it. But it really just depends. I don't really know where her allies are, other than the broom, and the broom can't vote. So similar to you, Albert, after this, these are people who I either just don't really know where they stand, or I think they can genuinely go home.
And so Rigo here says Carolyn said it at the reward. Did it as 2 different ones. But so Carolyn told Danny and Brandon that Josh played his idol because Josh only had it until the merge. And I do remember Danny being like, oh, it's only good until the merge. Like, so if they're buying what Carolyn is selling, then they'll know that Carson's idol isn't real.
That actually puts Carson and Jamie in a worse position.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, hadn't considered that.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So, Albert, I think you said your 7 under your breath, but who's your 7?
I did. My 7th is Kane. I think he's an interesting guy who's like, I'm a little nervous to have him this high, because I feel like I can see his archetype going next, because he's kind of in the middle a little bit. And I think he's a guy who's seems like he thinks he has more influence than he does, which is dangerous. Thinks he's better positioned socially than I think he really is. I think him and Josh have some similarities in that capacity. And he's just like, he's like a big dude who like looks like he could potentially be threatening in challenges. But I don't know. I think he's still building inroads with Carson last game, and seeing that was nice. And I think that'll be able to insulate him a little bit better. So I think he lands somewhere like right here in the middle of the pack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for Kane. My bottom 5, I think any of them could go home, and Kane's one of those bottom 5. So I'll talk about him in a little bit there. But Alexa, who's your 7?
I'm going to mention Heidi for the first time on this podcast. Kind of similar to Lauren. I don't really know where she stands. However, she is on the tribe that I think is going to win immunity. So I think naturally that helps. She's proven to be very athletic. But in terms of alliances, I really don't know. But I do know there isn't really a reason to get rid of her. And right now is typically that time to get rid of perhaps the Joshes. I feel like the people where there's sort of like a common enemy. It doesn't seem like that's the case for Heidi. We've been told that she and Danny are very close. I haven't particularly seen that. But it seems like the Sokas are super, super tight, minus previously Josh. So I think Heidi's okay. I just have her low down because I don't really know exactly who she's aligned with.
So she seemed like she was going to be tight with Danny, right? Like that's where it seemed like it was going. And then Danny, I don't know. Like I feel like it might just be like out of necessity. My bottom five, and I'm not saying this in order, I'm just saying who they are. I have Jamie, Brandon, Heidi, Josh, and Kane. Now, Brandon, I think, is on the winning tribe out of these two groups, but I also think that if his team loses, he's in the most trouble, right? Jamie, I think, is just
100%.
She's not aware. She's talking to too many people. She's doing too many things. She thinks she has a real idol and she doesn't. So she might play too aggressive and that might bite her in the ass. Carson might also say, hey guys, maybe we should try to flush this idol. The only other person who knew was Matthew and Matthew's gone. Heidi, I just worry because her edit's not there. Josh, he's part of the meat brigade, whether he wants to be or not. And then Kane, like Albert, I agree with you. Like, just kind of feels like he's in the middle. He's kind of that archetype. He's kind of a big guy. Who's he really aligned with? It seems like he wants to be with Carson, but does Carson want to be with him as much as he wants to be with Carson? I don't know. All that being said, so all five of these people I think are super, super vulnerable this week. But I will put Kane at number 8 because I think the reason to vote him out makes the least sense out of those 5 reasons. I think Kane ultimately, if he's as much of a nerd as he says he is, you don't have to worry about him with the physical part of the challenges. Even if he is a bigger guy, he's just a bigger guy, whatever. But he's not somebody people are really targeting since that first boot, but he's definitely somebody who could take a straight bullet like we saw Michelle take back in 33 or Elizabeth take back in 37. Like he's definitely somebody who could land in that category. I just think there's too many non-straight bullet takers here. Like there's too many targets. Like it just makes no sense.
I also have Kane at number 8. Kind of for similar reasons. I think the reason that I like Kane so much is because he actually seems like the person, other than like Carolyn and Franny and Matt, where I feel like I know him personally because that's a lot of the content that we get about him. It's what he likes to do, like what he's a nerd about. And that conversation with Carson, you could see Carson was thinking about that from a more strategic perspective. And Kane was like, I finally have a really good friend. And I find that enjoyable to watch and really endearing. So I don't know, again, like same as you, Phil, I don't know who's going to say his name or why they even would, but I also don't know who would say, actually, let's not vote for Kane because I'd rather him be around.
He reminds me of Sammy from the previous season. He has like kind of like that same energy. I don't know.
Yeah. Unbridled optimism.
Right. It's just like everything's going to go well, regardless of
well, wait until you hit your 30s, kid. All right. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, Albert, who's your 8?
All right. So my 8th player, and I totally echo you, by the way. I think these is like all of these players should be kind of like, not kind of, should be very worried. I have, man, I was oscillating between these two, but I think I'm going to go with Heidi at 8 because of the reasons that we stated. I think she's somebody who doesn't seem to have, I can't recall, I don't know if you guys have seen it. Has she had a conversation on screen that showed her linked to any of the key players? I don't really remember it beyond conversations with, I believe was it the Soka? Yeah, because Soka tribe. So here's the thing that happens, guys. When teams don't go to tribal council, it's hard to figure out where other players stand. And I feel like we haven't seen enough of their voting because frankly, it's been the decimation of the Tika tribe. So I don't know exactly where she stands or what her chops are like, but I feel like she's somebody who can necessarily just be like a product of numbers, like not with the right group at the right time. And those players tend to react in a way that's frantic. When people don't have conversations with you on Survivor, all of a sudden paranoia in a game that's really laden with paranoia spikes. So when people spike with paranoia because they're not in the in crowd, they start to act crazy. And then people are like, okay, this person's acting weird. Let's get rid of this person. So I could see her being in that. If she's not able to place herself in one of these pockets, I could see her potentially going at this vote.
I have her at number 9. So right behind you, Albert, and right behind you, Alexa. I think so. I'm trying to think if we saw her. I think the best moment we saw of her this season was during the Claire Boot episode. She kind of was the one who was like, I'm the middle person. I'm the person here who's going to decide whether it's going to be, Claire who goes home or whether it's going to be the others. I forget if it was Danny or Josh or whoever it was. I feel like Josh.
Josh.
But yeah, but she definitely had that. And she was talking to Danny a little bit. I think a little bit with Heidi is she is falling more in line of the Heather, where she actually does feel like she's in an okay spot. The editors just don't care that she's in an okay spot because I don't think she's going to win the game. And so I do think that she is having those conversations. She did go through a tribal council where it went her way, and the people who she thought were going to tell her the truth told her the truth, and she determined who went home and all of that. And she did seem like a focal point of that episode. I mean, she had 3 confessionals in that episode, and the highest in that episode was 4. So, or 5 from her tribe. So I think that she's actually in an okay spot. But if this is going to be some advantage get in, there's going to be other idols that come into play because now we've hit Mergatory, and her side loses, which I do think her side is the side that's going to lose with Danny, Heidi, Josh, Kane, Lauren, and Jam Jam. And they can't get Danny because he has an idol. And then they're worried that Josh's fake idol somehow glues itself back together and is real. I just think Heidi's legitimately in danger this week. So I have her at number 9.
Josh is like, don't touch that. Leave it alone. I was like, no, so much.
So bad, man. I can't handle that poor man.
It brought back my own memories. Like when my immediately necklace like falls off my neck and I'm just like,
yeah.
Like, dude, I got nauseous. Every now and then I have a little moment of nausea with Survivor, and that was one of them.
I love that.
Yeah.
But Alexa, who's your 9?
I actually have Matt at number 9, which is pretty darn low.
Especially for you love Matt.
I know I love Matt. I always put Matt and Franny right next to each other, right where they belong. But I do think this I already had him at number 9, but especially after this conversation about like. For me, I'm so happy that showmances can finally play again, but this could be really bad for them because now we're at the point where their tribe accepted them, but now they're about to merge with like 6 to 8 other people who are like, wait a second, there's a voting block of 2 people right there. Mm-hmm. So that's already intimidating. I do think we've been shown that Franny is the more strategically sound one of the 2. And he doesn't have a vote, and that is not super public, but could become public very easily. And if that's the case, it's very easy to get rid of him, especially if he's like, oh, but I've got this idol. Then if Danny wants to get involved, it could be a big moment. Mm-hmm. I don't think Matt's going to go home, but I do think if he goes home, it would be in spectacular fashion.
Mm-hmm. Oof. It would be spectacular, but I just don't think this week. That would be crazy, though. I'd feel so bad for him because he probably missed the merge too, right?
I think,
or not the merge, the jury.
I think you missed the jury. Yeah, this is like the worst time to go home. Mm-hmm. Sorry to whoever goes home.
Albert, who you have at 9?
So at 9, I have Jamie, who I hate to say that I don't like players or I'm rooting against them, but let's just say she's not my favorite. Okay. I'm pretty sure she said something along the lines of like, I'm basically amazing at everything, or like there's nothing I can't do out here. Like she said something that was so off base. I'm like, she has no idea what she's talking about. Mm-hmm. Like she literally, I'm like watching her play, and I'm like, when I see a really heightened level of no self-awareness, right? When I see a player not be aware of their surroundings, not be aware of what's happening around them, I think that she's in for a rude awakening. She's going to overplay her hand. I don't think she's really well positioned with the people that she thinks she is. So I have Jamie, and she just seems like there's a lot of players that don't have a lot of influence, and they'll just like kind of run with it and then find a crack. She's like the opposite. She seems like she doesn't have a lot of influence, but she wants to be really opinionated. She wants to be really like assertive and like kind of like pointing directions. I could see a little bit of bossiness coming out of her. I don't necessarily think she's in for a really deep run. So I have Jamie here in this position.
So what happens when you think you have two idols? And like, I keep trying to watch and I'm like, put yourself in the shoes if she's somebody who actually has two idols. And people either love or hate the production made fake idols, but we're getting something good out of it for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so Alexa, I'm going to assume we have her in the same spot at number 10. Do you have her at 10?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just assuming, because I'm assuming I know me and Alexa have the same bottom three. Albert would, but he has Carolyn still, who he's refusing to put on his Carolyn truther hat. But I agree. I agree with this Jamie take because it is tough, right? Albert, if you were playing season 23 and you got two idols, no part of you would think one was fake. You would just be like, great. I got two idols. This is awesome.
Like this is incredible. It's a dream.
Yeah.
Because also the fake idols that were coming out, you knew when they were fake for the most part, except for Bob's. Bob's was like the only idol that was really tough. But like you were on a season with Ozzy. We all know Ozzy can't make a fake idol worth shit. So you knew you were good if you've got two idols. And maybe one was fake, but you at least knew you had a real one. Now you're Jamie. You think you have two idols. One of them is real, but it's a temporary idol. But you're overplaying maybe a little bit because you think you also have a real one and you're trying to gain some power on a tribe where you're new and you're trying to act like I'm important there. But it was the line of, I'm the person you should want to be talking to because I have all the power. That's the one that was bothering you. And that's the one that just got me. And I'm like, oh man, she is being set up with the Bradley confessional of I'm playing A+ Survivor and then bye-bye, see you later. Yeah. Like that is what she is being set up with right now. And part of me faults her and part of me is like, oh my God, like what is she doing? She's just not. But then another part of me is with Alexa where it's like, if I had two idols on Survivor, I'd be like, damn, I'm killing it. And especially when one of those idols was found with who you thought was your closest ally, you're never going to think that he made a fake idol on you or did anything like that. You're just not going to think it. So, but she's number 10 because, man, she's in trouble. And I do think she is on the, I think she's on the tribe that loses. Or no, I think she's on the tribe that wins, which is why I actually have her higher than
expected
people.
At 10.
Yeah.
She also, for what it's worth, if even operating with two real idols, being the new kid, and like you want people to talk crap to you rather than the other way around. And I know it was like it couldn't have been a worse situation with talking about Matt to Franny, but still, like let Franny tell you who she doesn't want to work with. Let them come to you. I think Jamie's toast.
Who's your 10, Albert?
All right, so 10 now. We're reaching the deep stages.
Who's going home?
This bottom three. 10th, I have Carolyn. And I know you guys. I mean,
you are not a Carolyn. That's good because we're like way too into her. So this is a good balance.
She was your one. Yeah. And I just think she's. And I think you guys made a really good point. I'm not sure which one of you said it, but yeah, it's a weird thing in Survivor where these decimated tribes go into a merge, and instead of being picked off, which theoretically is what you should do, it's like the least variance play. They just ended up like hanging around, right? Like they get absorbed by other people and they use them as numbers. But man, a player like Carolyn, to me is very volatile. And I actually look at this cast and I think there's a lot of rational players. And even, as I'm like constantly rethinking the game and how it's played, I'm like, man, why did Carson go with her? Why did he vote against, why did he vote against Helen and Sarah? But it's like, maybe they're just setting themselves up for like a late stage game where like, if I'm sitting next to Carolyn, I'm probably going to win. I don't know if it's a little early for that type of like play, but I don't know. I just think that she's such a spastic player that's going to be so hard to work with in a game that's so, man, this isn't, like you said, you guys maybe sound old a little bit, but this isn't 10 years ago. Like there's a lot of fast paced changes and you have to make decisions and you need people that you can count on and can go with the flow and jump and like be able to like not spill over the apple cart. And I don't think Carolyn's that player. I think that like, who can really count on her? Who's going to be really comfortable putting the faith of their game in for the next, whatever they have left, 15 days or so. I don't know. I don't think that she's that player. And I think that she's just like, she has yam sort of, and then she doesn't really have much else. Her and Josh don't like each other. And then these new people are going to be like, who is this person. She seems a little loony. Like I have her that number for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the main person who would like reliably depend on her is like Carson, because I think he thinks that he would play kind of like her, and he ended up choosing her over the alliance that we thought he was going to stay within their vote. But I think she and Jam Jam have been like together for too long, where they might need a minute apart. But that's definitely a really good point. I think, especially with the like Brandon Danny situation, that like people will brush her aside. For that, and that's probably going to bother her, and she'll get people out as a result of it. But that's why I have Carolina 1.
Well, so we all have the same bottom 2 of Brandon and Josh. So Albert, why don't you go first and tell us who you have at 11 and then who you think ultimately goes home, and why'd you put that person at 12 instead of the other?
I mean, these two are like, it's interchangeable. I think that okay, I truly believe that Brandon is a little bit better positioned. He should be my 11, but I'm actually going the other way around. I'm going Josh at 11 because, again, Josh, you always hear him in confessional saying, man, I had this great situation with my other tribe and I got swapped. And it's like, no, you didn't have a great situation with the other tribe. You're actually in a lot of trouble. And I really do believe if Matthew is not medically evacuated last week, that Josh gets voted off. I really think he was gone. I thought that his fake idol getting blasted is it for him. I think he's in a lot of trouble, and I think he's somebody who's really going to like take Josh in right now. Like he was about to like get himself out of trouble with Yam Yam, and then all of a sudden he just like showed his ass by showing a terrible idol. I don't think he has many really avenues to turn to. I think all the doors are closing on him. I think he's untrustworthy. He looks like a schemer. The fake job thing of like, I'm a doctor, but I'm a personal trainer, but I'm really a doctor. It's like just a bunch of little unnecessary lies. It's just too much for him. I think he's my 11th guy.
And then why did you put Brandon at 12 then? What ultimately set you over the top on it?
So the reason I have Brandon at 12, man, is I do agree that last week what we saw was really bad for his case. And I think that a player like Carolyn, since she's near the bottom, is going to blow up that game. Brandon and Danny have this whole thing going on. And Brandon, we already saw, he doesn't have those Carson or Yam Yam like qualities, right? Where like in episode 1, when things started going a little bit hairy for him, what did he do? He played his idol. Like he's a little knee jerky, and knee jerky isn't good in the merge. Like he doesn't have an idol to count on now, if I'm not mistaken. So, and I think he's a big physical threat in a season where, there's just, physicality. There's been some decimated tribes. Like, I just think that he's that guy. Something about the way he's being presented to me, I just feel like he's the guy that's going to go this week.
Yeah, this is a really tough one because they're also on 2 different sides of it. Right. So I have Brandon at 11, Josh at 12, although I think Brandon's tribe is the one that's going to lose. So, however, I think if Josh is vulnerable, he will 100% be the person who goes, because in my mind, Brandon pissed off one person. Josh has he's pissed off like 7 people, but 7 people have verbally said that they don't want to work with him. So to me, that's just a larger number of people. I think you used a really good word to describe Brandon earlier, Albert. You said, I think he's like a malleable player. Josh, it doesn't seem like you see that as much. So I think if it was between the 2 of them, which it obviously won't be, I can say, okay, well, Brandon might be a better alliance member for me long term than Josh. But maybe his fake idol will save him.
I go based on edit, man. I can't help myself. That's what I do. That's why I saw the whole time that Sophie was going to win your season, and that's what because it was so obvious from the edit on the show. This is being facetious. Don't worry, Albert. I know you're like, wait, he wasn't watching Survivor South Pacific, but I really do.
Still hurts. Too soon.
It's too soon. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I'll wait till we're on year like 15 and then I'll bring it up.
Until he's officially old school.
You're not officially old school yet. But man, when I look at this, the fact that they ended up on opposite sides made this so easy for me with my 11 and 12. I knew that they were my 11 and 12 as soon as I saw that, because I said, man, Brandon and Josh have both been set up to fall on their face. And now it's just a matter of which side do I think loses. And I think Josh's team is weaker. Danny, Heidi, Josh, Kane, Lauren, Jam Jam. They don't have Carson for puzzles, and they don't have Brandon for strength. I think they're the weaker side, which is why I put Josh at 12. I think he is, if they lose, he's going home. And with Brandon and Josh, the thing was with the Meat Brigade last week, and I'm going to say how many times I can say Meat Brigade during this episode,
like
but with that last week, that was such a setup to have that fall apart.
I mean, yeah,
these two guys.
Well, think about it. There was 4 consecutive female players voted off, and this whole Meat Brigade thing's coming up now. Which there it is. There's Meat Brigade.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Take a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Brandon to me seems like the most obvious guy, right? He's literally the biggest, most physical player remaining. I mean, Josh isn't too far behind, but yeah, I agree with you, Phil.
Yeah. So that's where I go. I just put Josh there, and I put Brandon at one spot ahead of him. But look, we're all in agreement. If one tribe loses, Brandon's going. If the other side loses, it's Josh. Like, we're all in agreement that it's going to be one of those two. And I just see it being difficult from an edit perspective and from the way that they're both playing the game. I find it difficult to believe that either one of them is going to be able to get out of it. It would have to be like a Lydia type vote where you're like, who the hell was Lydia? Like, what do you talk? Why'd you vote out Lydia? Yeah. That's just what I feel here. I think it's their time.
Yeah. Albert, one last question for you. At this stage, who's going to win? Who's winning?
I think this is the most obvious one we've ever had, Alexa. So I have to say that before he goes.
You think it's the most obvious?
Well, in terms of what you're going to say, yeah, I think it's obvious. Who you got?
Okay, I'm going to answer two ways. Can I answer 2 ways?
Yeah, go ahead.
Please.
Who I'm pulling for is Carson.
Okay.
But who I think is going to win is Yam Yam.
Oh, okay.
Good.
Okay, see, I thought you were just going to go Carson across the board.
Yeah, I'm pulling for Carson, but my fear is that Carson is going to get the Shan Omer edit where it's just like, wow, this person's playing great. They're unbelievable. And then they're just like, they just have this like tragic boot episode where you're just like crying. Like, like when I was watching Shan play, I'm like, this girl's playing perfect. And then like when she got voted off, I couldn't believe it. So yeah. My gut tells me that Carson might be getting a little bit of that Shan and Omer edit.
Yeah. I had when I did my little ranking, I said 1A, 1B, and 1C for Franny, Jam Jam, and Carson. Like, there's so much game left, but those 3 I think are the clear front runners, and Danny's just like a step behind them.
100%. Yeah, oh yeah, love to Franny too. I think Franny has a lot of game too. I actually think Franny's more likely to win than Carson, believe it or not.
Yeah, I could see that.
Justifiably so. She's a good player. I think very good player.
Definitely.
Well, before we get out of here, I just want to really quick update this, and then it'll be really fast because we haven't done this yet. Here's power ranking scores for everybody who's playing along. Corwin Green has 43 in first place. Trey Carter and Benny Espinal both with 39. Andy Vogel 38. Jake Thulin 38. I have 37. I wanted to throw that one in. Forrest to Grow 35, and everybody else is losing. And then we are counting. So even though Albert said it wasn't, until we get like official word, because well, I always say we go by what we see on the screen when we do our fantasy games and everything like that. And what it is listed as right now on the wikis is a quit. So
it's listed as a quit on Wikipedia. I couldn't believe that.
It is. So right now we're calling it a quit until maybe we get a retroactive scene or something in this next episode. So these scores could change. But for the fantasy game, for the patrons playing that, Jake Doolin's winning with 38, Michael Carroll 37, Rigo Urquilla 30, Forrest DeGroat 30. And then Angela Mangano with 28. Everybody else is well behind there. Alexa's dominating our fantasy game at 38 points, but she has plenty of time to lose. If I know Alexa, who has Brandon, Josh, and Heidi, and Lauren on her team, I say she does not have the winner, and she will fall apart eventually. Albert, this was a pleasure as always. This was the 3rd time because we had you come on to talk about Sophie. Then we had you come on during Winners at War to give a little power ranking, and then this is the 3rd time that we've had you on because we took a little bit of a break from having guests too. So it was nice to have you back and
welcome back
and see that you're still into this game as much as like ex players really should be. Because some just fall off and they're like, I can't do this anymore. It's too different of a game. I don't like it. But you seem like you care just as much as if it was season 27.
Yeah, I still love it. I still, it's even in its new iterations as the game changes. I still love to watch the characters and the gameplay and like even what you said earlier, Phil, like gaming the game. And just like I'm always looking at it from like, oh man, what would I do in this person's spot? Which is obviously easier when we're sitting at home. But I love the game. I'm glad thank you guys so much for having me on. This is super fun for me to do and still stay engaged with the Survivor community. So I hope that, the fans watching this episode can glean some insights from our breakdown,
Yeah. I can't wait for someone on season 47 to go to the feast and use your tactic.
Please.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming on. It was great having you. Hopefully have you back on again soon. We're going to be back after the episode this Wednesday, 9:15, 9:05, depending on how much Phil and I want to gossip beforehand, Eastern time. Make sure to tune into that. Become a patron. There's still a lot of good reasons to become a patron. We just completed our March retrospective in which we did a Survivor aggravation bracket. So that's a really fun one to listen to. All you need to do is become a $10 patron for that. So follow us on social media.
I have to give a quick shout out. Jayburn Aquatic said that he would become a $20 patron if Matthew got medevac last week or quit because he was so convinced Matthew wouldn't. And he did become a $20 patron. So thank you, Jayburn Aquatic.
And it lives up to his word.
Yes.
Wow.
I appreciate it.
What's his name?
Jayburn Aquatic.
All right, Jayburn. Thank you for being a patron. Our next retrospective will be about you. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye, everyone.